Luke felt oddly uneasy upon his first arrival in Germany. He had landed in Berlin from America and spent several days visiting the classic tourist spots. Brandenburg Gate, the Reichstag building, Museum Island, all impressive, yet the crowds, the city's modernity, and the noise didn't give him the atmosphere he had expected. He knew that coming to Europe wasn't just about taking photos. He had a strange connection with old structures and the scent of history in the stones. One evening, an elderly traveler at the hostel mentioned a town, Quedlinburg. It was a small town, a few hours by train from Berlin, preserving its medieval architecture. The old man spoke with his eyes cast downward, but then in a low voice added, "There's an old museum there. Most people don't know about it. If you go visit during the day, don't stay after dark." Luke found the advice strange, yet at the same time it was compelling. The next day, he bought his ticket and set off early in the morning by train. Quedlinburg was unlike any place he had seen before. The uneven rooftops of wooden houses, narrow cobblestone streets, and gas lamps glowing in front of shops gave the impression that time had stood still. There were tourists, but few. Walking through the town's center, he felt as if he were immersed in history. He first visited St. Servatius Church. The heavy stone walls and high ceilings of Romanesque architecture pulled him in. Walking alone inside, his footsteps echoed. A shiver ran down his spine. Glancing between the stone columns, he thought he saw a shadow move. Seconds later, there was nothing. Jet lag, he reasoned. He was still tired from the long flight, but as he was heading toward the exit, a faint tone rose from the pulpit. It sounded as though the church organ was playing, yet there was no one inside, or at least no one he could see. The sound lasted only a few seconds before cutting off entirely. Luke's heart raced as he hurried outside. While wandering the town, his eyes caught an old stone bridge. It arched over a river, ancient and silent. Luke stopped in the middle and looked at the water. Reflections wavered on the surface. For a moment, he saw his own reflection, but beside it appeared something else, a vague, faceless silhouette. He froze. When he looked again, the reflection had vanished. No one was beside him. But on the stones of the bridge, he noticed faint carvings, as if etched with fingernails. A circle with 3 dots. Occasionally, German words appeared. "Hört uns." "Hear us." A chill ran down his spine. He tried to take a photo, but his phone refused to focus. The image remained blurry. As Luke continued through the town streets, a heavy feeling settled over him. Some windows in the surrounding houses were fogged, though the air was cool and no stove appeared to be lit. Occasionally, he felt movement behind curtains, yet when he drew them back, the rooms were empty. One of the most unsettling moments occurred at the old clock tower in the town square. Luke had been taking photos when the tower began to chime. The clock struck in discord, even though it was daylight. Other tourists seemed unaffected, walking as if nothing had happened. The bell's strange timing seemed to exist only for him. By the end of the day, returning to the hostel, a small bookstore on the street caught his eye. Inside, the heavy scent of old paper and mold was overwhelming. Most of the books were in German. Luke randomly picked one up, and a yellowed card fell from between its pages. It read, "Museum der Stimmen, Museum of Voices." Beneath it, a handwritten line added, "When it closes, they speak." Luke remembered the old traveler's warning that morning. He felt a strange pull toward this museum. The elderly woman at the bookstore, upon seeing the card, rolled her eyes. "You want to go there?" "Visit during the day, don't stay after dark," she said tersely. Luke's curiosity deepened. The next day, around noon, he set off to visit the museum. On a small hill outside the town stood the stone building, fitting perfectly with the medieval town yet appearing foreign. Large windows were dark, and the heavy iron door seemed imposing. Above it, a rusty sign read in German, "Museum der Stimmen." Upon entering, darkness and silence greeted him. An old woman sat at the reception desk. She handed him a ticket without looking at him. Luke said, "Danke," and the woman muttered in a low voice, "Vor Sonnenuntergang," before sunset. Luke understood. Again, the same warning. Yet his curiosity had already surpassed his fear. The museum's first rooms contained ordinary items, Roman-era artifacts, old books, broken musical instruments. But Luke's attention kept returning to the glass cases. Some of the glass surfaces were fogged, as though someone inside was breathing. In one display, a small mask was completely fogged. Luke leaned in and noticed faint fingerprints on the glass, as if pressed from the inside. He stepped back quickly. The room was empty. Trying to reason, he thought, maybe it's humidity or leftover breath from previous visitors. But the case was sealed. No one could have touched the inside. In the next room, a broken violin was displayed. As Luke approached, he heard a faint string note, like metal scraping in the air, but rhythmic. The strings were gone. Luke shivered and stepped back. When the sound ceased, he noticed small words etched into the wall. Faint German words, barely legible. Bleibt. Stay. Questions crowded Luke's mind. The tiny incidents in the town, the symbols on the bridge, the card in the bookstore, and now this museum, all formed a chain. Somehow, they had guided him here, without him realizing it. He began searching for the exit, but the corridors repeated, doors vanished, and he couldn't leave. Light from the windows had dimmed. Dusk was settling outside. Luke's throat felt dry, yet a part of him still wanted to explore. Every step revealed more. In the last room he entered, he trembled. This time it wasn't fog. A clear message was written on the glass in English. "Luke, don't leave." At that moment he realized. He was the first visitor whose name the museum knew. Luke froze in place, struggling to catch his breath. The message on the glass was still fresh. "Luke, don't leave." He searched for a rational explanation. "These are just signs, maybe some art installation," he told himself. Yet the weight in the room, the silence, and the pattern of fingerprints on the glass were far too deliberate to be mere art. He stepped forward cautiously. At the corner of the room, a stone statue inside a case drew his attention. The figure was once a guard or sentinel from the Middle Ages. Yet upon closer inspection, the eyes and facial features seemed unnervingly lifelike, as if the statue was watching every movement he made. Luke stepped back. A faint scratch at the base suggested someone once carved a mark, now worn away, leaving only a shallow depression. At that moment, Luke realized the museum's layout no longer made sense. Corridors twisted and turned in ways that defied logic. The hallways looped back on themselves. Rooms shifted with every step. Paranoia began to gnaw at him. Each small clue he had noticed in the town, the church organ, the bridge symbols, the card in the bookstore, suddenly formed a coherent pattern. They had all guided him here, without him knowing. He approached another display case. Inside sat an old album or journal, pages slightly open as if waiting for him. Luke leaned in. The handwriting was trembling, old, written in a mixture of German, English, and Latin. The words were cryptic, but seemed to communicate a message. The most striking line read, "They are patient. They wait for the visitor who follows the signs." Luke's chest tightened. He thought of the day's events, the minor incidents in the town. Everything made sense now. The museum had been orchestrating his visit. Luke tried to locate the exit, but no matter where he went, the corridors repeated themselves, doors disappeared, and the layout was inconsistent. Flickering lights overhead only added to the disorientation. Shadows in the cases seemed to shift, morphing with each step. Luke's mind screamed at him to run, yet reason pushed him to observe, to study the space before making any rash moves. A display caught his attention. A small dresser, its door slightly ajar. Luke approached cautiously. Inside were arranged old keys and trinkets, each positioned meticulously. But what unnerved him most was that the keys appeared to reach slightly toward the glass, as if extending from the inside. He tried to touch them, but the glass was solid. Luke recoiled, his breath shallow. As he moved deeper into the museum, the lights changed again. Some lamps flickered violently, others went completely dark. In the dimness, shadows inside the displays seemed alive. But no shape ever fully formed. They shifted endlessly, blending together, defying logic. Then he heard it. A sound, barely audible, almost within his own ears. A faint whisper. "Follow." The voice was unrecognizable, yet carried a clear intent. A beckoning. Luke tried to reason. Acoustic resonance, maybe. But each step brought the whisper closer. Logic clashed with instinct. His body screamed danger, yet he had to keep moving. Finally, Luke discovered a door, but it did not lead outside. It opened into another room, darker and older than the rest. Stone walls, cracking wooden beams, and a dusty rug covered the floor. There were no display cases, only a large platform in the center and several old chests upon it. Luke stepped forward cautiously. One chest trembled slightly, though there was no visible movement inside. Luke approached and noticed ancient symbols etched on the lid. The markings formed a language he could not comprehend, but clearly communicated a warning. Strangely, as he stared, goosebumps rose on his arms. The symbols emanated a subtle, inexplicable energy. Suddenly, he felt a vibration in the corner of the room. A metallic scraping sound, rhythmic and deliberate, emanated from the chest. Luke darted to the door, but it was gone. The boundaries of the room were shifting. Every step created a new, unfamiliar space. The museum had transformed into a labyrinth. Luke realized he had to outsmart it. Random movement wouldn't free him. He studied the arrangement of objects, the sequence of displays, the patterns of fogged glass and angled masks. He pieced together a strategy, using observation and deduction to navigate the shifting corridors. Hours passed. Luke analyzed the museum's hidden logic. Each room contained subtle changes. Fog on the glass, the angles of masks, markings on stones. All led him to a specific exit. Finally, he reached a door that seemed ordinary, leading outside. As he prepared to step through, he glanced back. On the inner surface of a display case, faint words appeared. "We wait for the next visitor." Luke took a deep breath and opened the door. He found himself in the town square. The sun was setting. The streets were calm and empty. The museum loomed behind him, its secrets intact, silent and foreboding. Walking back to the hostel, Luke realized the truth. The museum was no ordinary building. It was a system woven with logic and patience, a living structure observing every visitor. And he had been its first test. A cold shiver ran down his spine as he considered one terrifying fact. The museum's patience was infinite. One day, it would call someone else, and they too would be tested. That evening, as Luke wandered the cobblestone streets of Quedlinburg, he felt a lingering weight. He had survived the museum, yet a part of him knew it still watched, calculating, waiting. And in that moment, he understood. Some places are not merely to be visited, they are to be understood.